through a real life EKG and pick out some of the finer points and some of the subtle things and some of the not so subtle things and get a little practice on it. So as always, take a minute, pause this video, look at this EKG and come up with an assessment on it, including an impression at the end, but go through our standard algorithm and hopefully you won't miss something. So again, pause for a minute, come back when you're ready. Hopefully that's given you enough time. Let's run through this sucker. So to start off with, rate. What's my favorite way to go through it? As I've said before, I don't like looking at the space in between them because that can be variable. I start at the beginning of the EKG and just count the number of QRS complexes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, almost 15 of them. I know that this strip is 10 seconds long, so there's going to be 6 of these in a minute. So I take the number that I counted, which is 15, multiply it by 6, and that gives me a number about 90. And again, we didn't quite get 15 in there, so we're going to go a shade under 90. So let's say like 85. What's computer say? Computer says 86. That's pretty darn close. Pretty good estimation. Rate. Rhythm. How about the rhythm? Rhythm can be a little hard to tell. Normally we're looking for a P before each QRS complex and no QRS complexes that don't have P's before them, and mostly looking the same P wave, and that looks like maybe there's a P wave there. But you know, a lot of these can be kind of hard to tell because there's this big old like T wave that's out here that's obscuring it. But if we really zoom in, it looks like there are probably 2 complexes there. There's probably a T wave right in the center here, and then a little hump for a P wave afterwards. And that looks like it's pretty consistent each time. Now, you could be fooled because these could be like little U waves at the end of it. But in this case, I think this is probably a P wave based on what I've seen with it otherwise. And some places those look a little more convincing for P waves. This looks like maybe a little separate hump itself. So we'll say that it looks like there is a P before each QRS, and there are no QRS complexes that don't look like they follow P waves. So we'll call this sinus rhythm for what it's worth, although again, this can be a little deceiving sometimes. You got to be careful. Rate rhythm axis. If we're going to go through the axis, let's just hit it. This is positive in lead 1. It is positive in lead 2, meaning it's all above the isoelectric line, the baseline. And then in lead AVF, which is the one that I typically look at otherwise, it's also positive. This gives us somewhere in the normal axis. I don't know exactly where, and I don't need to put a number on it because it doesn't really help me. But normal axis, let's say, for this. All right, rate, rhythm, axis. How about the intervals? Let's look at our 3 intervals that we typically will look at. Again, the PR interval is going to be a little hard to see here because we can't really see the beginning of the P wave. It all kind of melds in with this big T wave back here. So this is going to be kind of hard to figure out. We may not be able to get an accurate PR interval, but let's say if we looked, kind of in here, if I found one that was most convincing, I'd say that I estimated that the P wave probably starts right about here, generously, about that third little box there. And then, so again, what's our PR interval? It should be from the time the P wave starts, it should be less than 1 big box to the time that the QRS complex starts. And it looks like that's probably the case. Again, a little hard to tell. Same thing kind of out here. Is this under 1 box? It looks like it probably is. So we'll say this is probably a normal PR interval. We look at our QRS complex, our QRS interval, and let's see. Here we have should be under 3 boxes, so this looks narrow. This looks like about 1, maybe 2 boxes for the whole QRS complex to start and finish. So we'll say narrow complex QRS. And then how about the QT interval? This one I can see just from looking at it that this looks like it's got a long QT. How can I can put a number on it, but it requires some calculation stuff, especially like the QTC, and there's all kinds of jazz. But let's look at this. Here we're looking over in V6. We're going to look at the R to R interval, so the space between the 2 points essentially there. And we see that looks like it is, 1 big box, 2 big boxes, 3 big boxes. It is shade under 3.5 big boxes. So by the time, 1.5 big boxes is complete, i.e. halfway between those 2 points, the T wave ought to be finished in order to have a normal QT interval. So again, we're looking there by 1.5 boxes. Is it done? No, not even close. If we look at it in another place, where the lines line up a little bit differently, again, same thing. Look from this R wave to this R wave, and about halfway there is the T wave complete? No, it looks like the T wave is only like halfway done at that point. So in this case, we're going to say this is probably a prolonged QT interval. And in fact, the QTC on this one is one of the longest I've ever seen. It was like 670 something or something like that. So this is a very prolonged QT interval, and that just predisposes you to arrhythmias and all kinds of stuff. If I see this person presented after a syncopal episode, I would probably put pads on this person and like pull out the magnesium and get ready to start sprinkling it on them whenever I get the chance. But this is not about that. This is about EKGs. So we'll call this a normal PR interval, normal QRS interval, and a long QT. So does that give us blocks? No, not specifically, but it does say we have a prolonged QT interval. All right, rate rhythm axis, intervals and blocks. How about ischemia and infarcts? A little hard to tell just because of the changes that happened as a result of that long QT interval, but we look through here and we don't really see a whole lot of ST depression that would suggest ischemia. Nothing there, not too much there. Not really, looks like it's probably in the middle of the baseline. Nothing too much that looks like ST depression, and certainly no ST elevation to suggest STEMI. So we'll say no ischemia, no infarcts. Any pattern recognition like peak T waves or hyperacute T waves or needle-like Q waves or anything like that? No, nothing much on here. So we will say that the overall impression for this one is sinus rhythm and a prolonged QT interval. All right, well, that'll wrap it up for this EKG of the week. Do all the things, like, share, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff, and we will try to keep bringing you some more EKGs to look at each time. So we'll see you later. Stay safe out there.